Let's bring in our panel now to weigh in. Victoria Coates, Vice President of National Security at the Heritage Foundation and former Deputy National Security Advisor, with us today. Alongside her, Darin Gaub, Senior Geopolitical Strategist and Black Hawk Helicopter Pilot Battalion Commander. Welcome into you both. Obviously, very difficult situation when you see them leaving. Witkoff, Netanyahu posted on X about this, and we heard from President Trump saying they must want to die. They don't want to have a ceasefire. He got it right. That's what Benjamin Netanyahu said. Unfortunately, now the future for the hostages remains very uncertain. Victoria, what would you be looking at in the coming days and weeks ahead?
Well, Bianca, good to be with you. I think that this is, as the president says, an inflection point. This may be the beginning of the end of this conflict at long last, and that we're probably going to have to change tactics a little bit. I think that's what Special Envoy Witkoff is signaling. And the message that goes to the Qataris and the Egyptians, our allies who are handling these negotiations, is that this is over. You're down to Gaza City. We can do it the easy way or the hard way. And one key point is that in the Wall Street Journal today, we had an op-ed by an alternative Palestinian in Gaza, the head of the so-called Popular Forces in Rafah, offering a new path forward, a kind of a tribal structure for the Strip, with these tribes providing some of the security, Israel obviously providing some of the security. But this guy says he hates Hamas. Let's start working with him. Let's not give Hamas any more legitimacy.
Yeah, well, apparently there's a lot of discussion about what that legitimacy looks like. It's a really good point you raised. And then we hear headlines and see headlines like Emmanuel Macron, President of France, says we're going to recognize Palestine as a state in September during the UN General Assembly. Obviously, that's been sort of talked about. Would they do that? UN obviously has a different take on all of this, as we know, the way they have ruled. Darin, pick up on where things go. And obviously, I think, too, President Trump weighing in on all of this, he has tried so hard alongside Netanyahu to get the living hostages out. But when you have terrorists, that's who you're negotiating with. These aren't sane people. These are people who want to kill every single Jew and wipe them off the face of the earth.
Yeah, and that's a critical point, Bianca, is that you're always dealing with Hamas here, and that's something we got to get away from eventually. But you can never trust them to be an honest arbiter with any of this anyways. They're always going to want to have some leverage over you in the way of hostages. This is exactly where I thought it would go so far, which is Hamas would drag it out as long as they possibly could. Netanyahu and Israel was smart to continue operations and while also trying to see if they could solve the hostage situation problem while continuing on with the military reality on the ground. So it's not a surprise. And I think this is going to continue going down that route where they're just going to have to keep clearing out Gaza with what is left, because frankly, there's not much left of Hamas either. We don't even know necessarily all the time who we're going to be negotiating with, because Israel keeps removing their leadership, as they should. Right. So it's time to chart that path forward. I think we need to keep negotiations going and keep our expectations low.
Right. Well, there were talks, if we turn now to Russia and Ukraine, talks this week. And reports today, Victoria, Elon Musk has ordered a shutdown of his Starlink satellite service. We know that it had been pivotal, really, really helpful. And it's happening as Ukraine took, territory from Russia in 2022. What do you make of Elon's move here? We know that there's Patriot systems going over to Ukraine still. And now the Starlink, how much of an issue will that be for the Ukrainians still in this battle, as it looks like Putin is continuing a land grab before he gets to any other negotiating table?
Right. And just real quick before we go to Ukraine, I just have to say what Emmanuel Macron is proposing at the General Assembly this September is a disgrace. He is pandering to the Muslim population of France. He's trying to prevent them from rising up. This is rewarding Hamas for October 7th. This is legitimizing the terrorism they practice against Israelis and Americans and French citizens. And he should be reminded of that. This is, as I said, a disgrace. It's why it's so important President Trump is in the White House, because a President Harris almost certainly would have followed suit. So I think we have to call that out immediately. And really, the president should have a very strong message to Keir Starmer when he arrives in Scotland that the UK should not do this as well.